Hello, friends and fellow followers of Jesus. As I sit here, our nation is over halfway in its final day of election 2020. Things seem to be tense out there, regardless of who might or might not win. For this week's devotion, I'd like us to go to the upper room with Trudy Snyder of Pennsylvania. We begin with the Old Testament prophet Jeremiah. You may remember him by his other name, the Weeping Prophet. Jeremiah went through so much tragedy and hardship. Like most biblical prophets, some of them went through hard times because of judgment. Other prophets found hard times because their king or their leaders didn't want to hear God's words of judgment. But a few, very small few, were like Jeremiah, whose hard times began at a young age. Most likely before his bar mitzvah, that usually happens around age 13, God called Jeremiah to give what the king thought was bad news and was definitely unwelcome news. As a young boy, his words may have sounded cute. But as he became a man who lived into his 70s, his words went from cute to condemned. Some tried to kill him. When Jeremiah complained to God about that, God told him plainly things would get worse, and so they did. Religious officials had him beaten and put into stocks at the gate so he'd be humiliated. He had multiple attempts on his life. Some officials decided that if they couldn't make him be quiet, they'd throw him into a well so no one could hear him. They left him there for dead. Even after being rescued, Jeremiah stayed locked up in prison until Judah was later destroyed by the Babylonians. Sounds like Jeremiah had good reason to be the weeping prophet. His second book, Lamentations, recounts some of the hard things he experienced, the sad feelings he felt, and in the midst of those, his thoughts on God. I want you to hear Lamentations chapter 3. The Lord is good to those who wait for Him, to the soul that seeks Him. It is good that you should wait quietly for the salvation of the Lord. It is good for you to bear the yoke in your youth, to sit alone in silence when the Lord has imposed it. Even when you're lying face down with your mouth to the dust, there may yet be hope. For the Lord will not reject forever. Though He may cause grief, He will have compassion flowing from the abundance of His steadfast love. For He does not willingly afflict or grieve anyone. Trudy Snyder of Pennsylvania wrote an upper room devotion back in March. She told about a friend of hers who for over 30 years has been sending her greeting cards. And it's not only a birthday card or a Christmas card. This friend sends a card for every holiday and never misses one. Trudy said that at one point recently her friend was struck by a tragedy when her house was burned to the ground. Her friend lost everything she owned. Trudy was sure that the cards would certainly stop coming, at least for a while, but they didn't. 3 weeks after the fire on St. Patrick's Day, a card arrived in the mail with her friend's usual cheerful greeting and best wishes. And Trudy was stunned. With all the turmoil that her friend was experiencing, she wondered how could she possibly find enough energy to pass along good cheer. The only explanation that Trudy could come up with for such resilience was her faith. Trudy said, quote, "My friend is unaware of how deeply her example has enriched my Christian walk," end quote. Sending a greeting card might seem trivial to most. But when you've been stripped of a lifetime of possessions in just a few hours, and yet you're still able to convey good wishes to others, there's nothing trivial about that. That is a witness in the truest sense of the term. Trudy concluded, quote, "While I was concentrating on the tragedy of her loss, My friend was clinging to the one thing no one could ever take from her, Jesus Christ and his promise of love. So how about you? Do you have the same confident hope shared by Trudy and by Jeremiah? My hope and my prayer for you is that you never go through a tragedy like Trudy experienced or like Jeremiah faced again and again. But my greater hope and prayer for you is that deep down inside you have faith in and hope of God that nothing on earth could ever shake. Nothing. Not a tragedy, not a hardship, and surely not the undesired outcome of a democratic election. No, none of those things, nor anything else, can shake the hope we have in Christ. So go, claim that hope and live it out. And maybe even send someone a card this week to tell them their hope can be in God.
His name is wonderful. His name is wonderful. His name is wonderful. Jesus, my Lord. He is the mighty King, Master of everything. His name is wonderful. Jesus, my Lord. He's the great shepherd, the rock of all ages. Almighty God is He. Bow down before Him, love and adore Him. His name is wonderful. Jesus.